I wanted to do a quick video on rumination because a lot of people have questions and have a hard time understanding the concept of rumination, so I felt that this may help. Now, first and foremost, I want to say rumination can be confusing, and a lot of people will have different opinions about rumination. I thought this would be good, though, that for me to share my opinion, what research shows, point you in the direction of other people that are pretty good when it comes to rumination, and listen to a few different people, because the more you can listen to, especially when you're listening to experts, the better chance you're going to have of success. So first, I want to say rumination is a compulsion. Sometimes people don't realize this, or they think that they're constantly having obsessions all day, but in reality, a lot of the times what we're doing is we're not just having obsessions all day, we're having compulsions all day, and really a lot of it is in the form of rumination. So what is rumination? Rumination is when we are constantly in our heads trying to figure out, analyze, dissect, and do something about the intrusive thought and the anxiety that we're having. So let's first kind of explain what it is. I don't know if there's a order we should go into, but let's go into what it is. So I just said analyze, figure out. A lot of times we will go back and replay things in our mind. Now sometimes you'll hear people say, well, then that's a checking compulsion, right? You're going back to replay to check to see if it bothers you. I agree. I think we sometimes get a little too specific and particular about the words we use. What I look at is rumination is when you are in your head, you're out of the present moment, and you're trying to figure out something that, in all honesty, doesn't have an answer, right? So checking, analyzing, playing something over and over. So how can this maybe play out? To give an example for everybody out there to see what rumination can be. And it can be about any single topic. Any topic you have, you can and probably do ruminate. If you have an obsession about hurting yourself or hurting somebody else or any type of harm, right? A harm obsession that you have, you can, in your head, reassure yourself, but ruminate on that reassurance, right? You're over and over going over things like, well, I'm not a bad person, right? And I know that I'm not going to be doing this, and I'm going to go check to see if this thought bothers me later. Or you're replaying in your head a Bible verse or a religious verse that is affirming what you're thinking. You're in your head trying to figure it out. Now think about this, okay? This is where OCD is very illogical. We know the answer to this, right? We know it. That we know the answer. If you're scared of hurting someone, you're not going to go hurt someone, because the people that actually go hurt somebody, they're not scared of it. They just do it. But you and I, or people with OCD, always have that, but what if? So when we get that what if, what do? We try to figure it out. And how does that normally play out? We ruminate. We go over something over and over and over and over. So rumination is a compulsion in the form of mental going over things, for lack of a better academic term, right? So you're going over things over and over and over. And that's often what we're doing throughout the day. We're really not having obsessions pop up. We're having those compulsions, and I would argue most of them are in the form or some form of rumination. Now, a lot of times people then say, okay, I get that, but I cannot stop ruminating. Well, let's talk about that. A couple different people give good ideas about this. One person I like is Dr. Michael Greenberg, and he talks about it in the form of agency is a word that he uses. I would highly recommend checking out Dr. Greenberg's podcast where he talks about rumination on OCD stories. I believe he has 2 or 3 of them. But basically how he explains it is you can't stop a thought from coming in, but you can stop yourself from ruminating. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, and it's what I think often is, well, wait a minute, if I'm stopping, doesn't that mean I'm forcing myself? Well, no, it depends on the context, right? Sure, you can yell to yourself, stop thinking, stop thinking, stop thinking, stop thinking. That's different. But by redirecting your attention and your focus on the present moment or what you're doing, as my therapist says, gently but firmly refocusing on the present moment, that is a healthy way of approaching rumination. So when you catch yourself ruminating, so you are at work, watching TV, hanging out with your spouse, with your kids, whatever it is, and you recognize that you are in your head ruminating about something, you can gently but firmly stop, which would be refocusing on the present moment. And that's not thought stopping or anything negative, right? So you're going to gently but firmly do that. Well, now you say, okay, well, I still don't understand how I do it. Well, how do you do it? As my therapist says, is response prevention, meaning you recognize that you're ruminating, right? You kind of catch yourself in the rumination. You gently but firmly refocus on the present moment, and you keep repeating that as often as you need to. You do not sit there and say, oh my gosh, I'm ruminating, I have to refocus. What you do is, when you catch yourself ruminating, you then refocus. It's more about a behavior, not telling yourself something. What Dr. Greenberg has on his website, and I actually have said this before and I really like it, is there are ways of kind of practicing the rumination. So you can do things like pick up an object, focus on the object, drop the object, and then focus on something else. That is what the refocusing is when it comes to rumination, right? You're not forcing something away, you're shifting your attention to something else. This can be practiced. My therapist had me do it where he says, look at your right hand and now look at your left hand. You didn't, most likely, unless you're, struggling with this for your OCD, you didn't force your right hand out of the way, you just refocused on your left hand. And that's how we deal with rumination. When we recognize the right hand is showing, we refocus on the left hand. I have found that doing this in settings that aren't necessarily OCD related are also helpful. So if you're at work or if you're at church or if you're somewhere else and you find yourself drifting away in thought, while that might not be rumination, the function of your mind not being present is sort of rumination, right? So I found myself when I am, in church or I'm doing something along those lines where I have to have better focus, I'm going to gently but firmly refocus on the present moment. So I'm kind of practicing before it actually happens. And I think that will help you all as well too. So if you find yourself, or if you can kind of think of a time where maybe you tend to drift in and out of thought and not stay in the present moment, practice that. You might not be in an OCD spiral or spin, but you can practice that, right? So that's what it is. That's how we can get better, and those are some ways that we can practice. As always, rumination is rough. There's a lot of different things out there. Make sure if you are listening or you're going to take some advice, it's got to be from a therapist that knows what they're talking about, or someone with OCD that's an advocate, or someone that has gone through ERP to give real life examples. So, as always, everybody, stay strong. We can get through this OCD thing.